John McMullen at JF McMullen. And he wrote an interesting article yesterday that I was reading, and I'm thinking to myself, this can't be true, can it? And the title is Eagles Are Keeping Veterans on Speed Dial. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that makes some sense, the fact that the Eagles are going to go out there and always kind of keep their eye out for some veteran players and, see what's out there. But one name that he starts his piece off with was Connor Barwin. Said he loved playing in Philadelphia, and he would like a second opportunity to come back to Lincoln Financial Field. And, I know, John, the Eagles always keeping their eyes open, looking for pieces. But this is an interesting one because Connor Barwin, the funny part is, when he was here at the end, when he left, we thought he was kind of done. And then he went and kind of had a nice little bounce around. But would you think that he has anything left in the tank?
Well, I think he's got something left in the tank as a potential situational player. The problem, I think, with Connor's standpoint, when he was successful here and in Houston, his best play was in 3-4 defenses as an outside linebacker. When he was forced to play as a defensive end with his hand in the dirt, not quite as effective, and that's what the Eagles play now. Although, as I mentioned, the modern game is a little bit different. There's more versatility when it comes to fronts, so you can probably work that out. But let's put it this way, he's not using his leverage because he's admitted and gone on record and said, I want to play for the Eagles. That's my desire. That's what I want to do. He's been talking to Howie Roseman, and the Eagles just don't have a spot for him right now. At his age, he's going to be 33 in October. Right now, he would slot in perhaps as the fourth defensive end, and you're talking maybe 30% of the snaps at that stage. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense when you have prospects like Josh Sweat and Sharif Miller and Joe Osman and even Deshaun Hall. So the Eagles have a ton of bodies. So what Howie's essentially told them is if there's an injury to Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, or Vinnie Curry, at that point, and you need somebody in that top three of the rotation, maybe that's when you make the call to Connor Barwin. And that's what we said about the speed dial. The Eagles are being very prudent about that type of thing. Same thing with Darren Sproles in the backfield. He's not in the Eagles' plan, but he wants to play. He'd rather play for them. Doug Peterson would probably want him back, to be honest. But the Eagles have other plans, Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders. However, if something goes wrong, pick up the phone and call them.
If somebody doesn't get you to first, because I saw with Sproles that I think I read something over the weekend down in New Orleans that Drew Brees is kind of lobbying for them to possibly bring him back. So, I mean, Sproles would probably have suitors if he wants to play, right?
Well, you would think. I mean, that's a logical spot for him because, as you mentioned, Drew Brees has a great affinity for when he was down there, but also understand they have Alvin Kamara to fill that role. So that's not necessarily a good spot, in my opinion, for Darren and his skill set. That might be the best pass receiver, difficult matchup out of the backfield there is in the entire NFL with Alvin Kamara. And then because he lives in San Diego still, started his career there, loves it there, as everyone does, basically, who's ever been to San Diego. The Chargers, even though they're in Los Angeles now, that would be another potential matchup. And, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you wait and roll the dice. I mean, Connor Barwin has said he's going to wait till camp, but he's not going to wait long if there's other offers. So that's part of it too. And look, it's probably not going to happen with either player, whether it is from signing with someone else or the fact that the injuries don't crop up. But it shows you sort of the status of this organization in the league when you have veteran players who've been here, who've enjoyed it, and this is one of the places they want to be at and want to play. I think it says something about the organization.
So you mentioned that they would keep these veterans on speed dial, and I mean that's an indication of what a good team should do, right? If you're a bad team and you think that you're gonna, you're developing younger players, but that's a clear indication that the Eagles, you don't do that unless you have the aspirations that the Eagles do. Is that we got to get the best level of player in here should something go wrong, not just hand it over to some young, green rookie or first or second year player that's developing.
Yeah, that's what you have to do, and that's always a tough balancing act because, let's be honest, I mean, Connor Barwin would still be able to help you more than insert the names, Sweat, Miller, Osman. He's still a better player than they are, knows how to play the game, has played it at a high level, at the professional level for a long time. But then you weigh in the role and say, well, if he's not going to play a lot, it's better to develop the younger guys. However, if he's forced to play a lot, like what happened with Chris Long last season due to Derek Barnett's injury, you'd rather have that veteran guy that you can count on. And remember, if the Eagles had room for a veteran edge rusher, Chris Long would be here, and he would be in that role. So it's very unlikely that Connor will be back, but you do have to have plan Bs and plan Cs in this league.
John, a lot of people are saying that right now this is the best roster on paper for the Philadelphia Eagles, better than the Super Bowl team. We all heard what Zach Ertz had to say. Is there any position right now that you're looking at that's saying, they're actually weaker here. They need some help here, and that's where this veteran conversation maybe comes into play.
Yeah, a couple. I mean, it starts with defensive end, ironically. I mean, last year this team had Chris Long and Michael Bennett to go along with Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett at the start. That's good. That's really good, and that's really deep. And he also had the versatility because Michael Bennett could move inside and play at a high level of defensive tackle. So they lost a really good player who's very, very versatile in Michael Bennett. Now, there were some issues in the locker room as far as perhaps wanting a bigger role, and they felt forced to move on. And you can argue for that. You can argue against it. But I do think that's a position you look at. I look at running backs still. I mean, on paper, the Eagles are better, but that doesn't mean they're good when you're talking about Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders. Maybe in a couple years, Miles Sanders will develop, and we can say they finally answered the issues in the backfield. But especially when you look at this division, and you see Ezekiel Elliott, and you see Saquon Barkley, and you see Adrian Peterson and all the running backs they have with the Redskins, it's not often you look at a particular position and say the Eagles are the worst team in the NFC East at this position, but you can say that credibly at running back still.
So what do you think about Josh Adams? Because he's someone that people are saying, he's not going to make the roster. He's not someone that's brought up very often. Is that a name that, we could be talking about with you come September, October, November?
Yeah, I mean, Josh is going to be in the mix. He's definitely a bubble player. He had shoulder surgery in the offseason, so he wasn't able to do much in spring work. He's supposed to be cleared for training camp. We'll see how that goes. He's going to need to be healthy. If you look at this team and we're stacking a potential depth chart, he's right. He's number 5 or number 6, and they might not keep 5. Never mind 6. It's conceivable they could keep 4. So he's definitely a bubble player. However, if you're going to say Josh Adams has no opportunity to beat out players like Corey Clement or Wendell Smallwood, I disagree with that. He was this team's leading rusher last year as an undrafted free agent, and he would have continued to be the starter into the playoffs if he didn't hurt his shoulder. So he's he's up against it from a number standpoint because you bring in Howard, you bring in Sanders, and you have veteran players in front of him. But as far as being a runner, even if you go back to his time in college at Notre Dame, he's pretty good. So I wouldn't write him off completely.
Speaking, you mentioned Ezekiel Elliott and running backs. He's back in the commissioner's office tomorrow, meeting with Roger Goodell. There was an incident at a Las Vegas music festival where he had a confrontation that resulted in a security guard falling down with possibly a little push or a little extra elbow grease from Zeke Elliott. Seems like there's always something with this guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the issues, and it's one of the things you have to be concerned about if you're the Dallas Cowboys, because it's pretty evident that they're not the same team when he's not on the field. They're not the same offense. Everything starts with him in Dallas. We've talked about that before, Mike, so they have to be concerned. The problem is there's no consistency in the NFL when it comes to personal conduct issues. Roger Goodell basically does what he wants in those types of circumstances. And you have to be concerned if you're the Cowboys simply because the league tends to be harsher with repeat offenders. And that's what he would be. If you look at that particular incident by itself, you would say, maybe if they're going to suspend him, it would be for a game or two. But you have to put in those mitigating circumstances, and this is not the first time he's been in trouble.
Yep, it seems that, once a summer you can pull up something and find his name kind of attached to it there. And as you mentioned, the Cowboys just simply are not the same team without him, right? I mean, this is a team that a couple of years ago was cruising along, and then he went out, and they kind of lost their way. And now they bring in Amari Cooper last year, and it shows you how different they are. But you wonder if, by the way, that's Siegel, but he's trying to he's trying to make his way down here. This is going to be interesting. I've never seen this before. This is pretty crazy. He's ploying, he's plotting his way in here.
Coming after me.
But it's really going to be interesting to find out how, with a full training camp of Zeke Elliott and Amari Cooper, how they're going to kind of split that up. And I know we touched on that a little bit, but where the Cowboys might have to start thinking about relying less on him because he's a tough guy to trust.
Well, I mean, you could argue that with Jerry Jones going back years. I mean, it seems every year they have a suspension on the defensive line, and he hasn't really changed his ways as far as maybe using a few more red flags, so to speak, when it comes to prospects who've had issues in the past. He believes in giving people second chances, and some that could be altruistic in some circumstances. It could be just a dumb thing to do in other circumstances. They've been hampered by a lot of suspensions over the years, and I don't think that's going to change, and I don't think they're going to change the way they do business because they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, John, and obviously this division is kind of what Philly and Dallas, right? We look at both those two teams, and they're both tinkering away. I'd like to get your thoughts on we like Howie the way he does things here, and Jerry Jones was always kind of snickered at, but has Dallas kind of got their act together recently?
Yeah, they have, especially from a personnel standpoint. You do have to give them credit. Their roster is pretty good. They have a lot of good players. They've made a lot of good decisions. I think Stephen Jones is a part of that as well. There's the famous story that Jerry wanted to take Johnny Manziel, the Texas native, and basically had to be tackled before going up to the podium. And Cowboys ended up taking Zach Martin, who's maybe the best guard in football. So, and that was Stephen Jones. So they've made some good decisions from a personnel standpoint, and I think they deserve credit for it. A lot of people talk about ownership in this particular division because you have Daniel Snyder, who's just an abject mess. He's basically the James Dolan of the NFL. I don't think Jerry Jones is that. What he is very high profile, obviously. Never met a camera he didn't like, and he's the most powerful owner in the NFL, to be honest. So he gets in a lot of hot water when it comes to certain issues that involve not only the Cowboys but the league as a whole. But if you look at what he's done from a personnel standpoint, because he has that GM tag as well, and that's rare for an owner. You really got to go back to Al Davis, essentially. There have been far worse. So he's not the best, but I would certainly say he's in the top half. So I think the reputation is a little bit unwarranted, to be honest.
Because that goes back to the beginning of the conversation. It's like, if you get a guy hurt, how willing are you to spend money and bring veteran guys in? It's really, we were just talking about, John, how NBA ownership and front office has become so impactful with the way these teams build that, years ago it didn't seem like you really took that into consideration as much, and it's very similar in the NFL.
Yeah, it's a bigger deal when it's bad than it is when it's good, to be honest, because sports are cyclical, and it doesn't matter how good you are. At certain points, if you stick around long enough, you're going to have difficult seasons as an organization. But the good ones tend to be steady, tend to make good decisions, and when you stack good decisions, good things happen. Whereas you look at a Daniel Snyder, you look at a Dolan, and that's everybody's in the forefront of their mind because of NBA free agency. And you think about the New York Knicks, and you think about Madison Square Garden, you think about the Mecca, and that guy can't spend $200 million to get somebody to play there. That says a heck of a lot about how bad he's been.
All right, John. By the way, did you watch the 40 yards of gold at all this weekend?
I did not. They were charging $40 for that thing, so I'll be interested to see what kind of suckers anteed up for that. We talk about that a lot. Pay-per-view is another thing. Everyone tries to get in it with gimmicks and lose a lot of money. I imagine they're going to lose a lot of money as well. But I did pick Marquise Goodwin to win because of his track history as far as being an Olympian, a lot of international experience. And when you have fast guys like that, and everybody, it's generally the best form that wins, and he was going to have the best form.
Yeah. Well, about 2,000 to 3,000 fans attended the event. It was like a 20,000-seat arena, and about 2,000 to 3,000 fans were estimated to be there. So, by the way,
sure
Ted Ginn, who was a favorite, he did not show up.
Who was the favorite?
I would imagine so. Sports Bets Live. Ted Ginn did not show up. He was a guy that a lot of people thought was could have been one of the favorites. Yeah. All right, football at 4. Johnny Mac, of course, every day we talk football, NFL right here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. All right, John, take care, pal.
All right, take care, guys.